please join me in welcoming Adele.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's bring it on up. While we're getting this up, as Vanessa shared, I started about 1 million years ago at Starbucks Coffee as a barista. Seriously, I started in 1989, which I'm guessing might be before some of you in this room were actually born. So I have I have a lot of years of experience. And if you can imagine a world where there are like less than 100 Starbucks locations, that was when I started with Starbucks. Pre-IPO, small regional coffee company, and I was there for 20 years, most of which was spent in US operations. I was a general manager. Well, actually, I started as a barista, then I became a shift supervisor, then I became a manager. I opened up a store. I trained lots of MITs, had the pleasure of training folks for our Japan marketing opening and our Manhattan marketing opening and all kinds of fun stuff. And then I reached a point where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. It's too hard. And so said to my district manager, hey, just so you know, I can't take another holiday at Starbucks, so I'm gonna start looking. Never even dreaming that like I could have a job at corporate and contribute on a different level. And she was like, that was on a Friday. She was like, let me get back to you. Monday, she's like, I found a temporary job for you while you look for another job. And that was managing all the regional training for the Seattle market. So kind of early on in my career, I definitely gravitated towards learning and development, helping people grow, and all that really fun stuff that is super passion of mine. And then I spent time in store op services where I managed our mystery shopping program, started up the first ever customer satisfaction survey with SMG, and then moved on to the corporate side of things where I had a really boring job leading change management for a global ERP implementation, which was like, I don't know, kind of upon reflecting, I'm like, I don't know what people were thinking with some of the roles that they gave me. I'm thankful, but I was completely not qualified for any of those roles. But I learned a ton. I am now with Krispy Kreme. I'm the vice president of talent development. I've been there about 2.5 years, and they really brought me on to overhaul all training. Like, we don't have a leadership development program. Our field training was broken, and they were like, you know what to do. And I was like, okay, let's do this thing. And it's been a wild ride over the last 2.5 years. I lead a very small but mighty team. We've got, when I started, there was one other person, and he also moonlighted as the diversity champion. So like we all wear many, many hats. But now our team is about double the size, and I'm going to share with you some of the really great work that we've done over the last couple of years. So let's get into it. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today, specifically. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about how learning and development fits into the Krispy Kreme culture, which is so, so important. I was very fortunate to have a senior leadership team that I did not have to convince that this was the right thing to do. They were already on board, so I could spend my time actually fixing problems as opposed to convincing someone that we needed to fix problems. So that's kind of a nice place to be. I'm also going to share with you our journey and how we transitioned from pretty much an analog system with a lot of paper stuff to completely digitized LMS platform. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming next for us, because we are definitely in the early stages of our journey. There's a lot more work for us to do. So, job security is awesome. And along the way, I will share a little bit about some of the tips and tricks that I learned in implementing some of the changes. So let's talk a little bit about our culture. This is our leadership mix. And yes, it's 12 items, which you're probably thinking, Wow, that's a lot. It is a lot. Why do we have 12? Any guesses? Dozens. We're a dozens business. Yes. And just to give you some context on how this leadership mix came to be, about 6 years ago, Krispy Kreme was acquired by a private equity firm. They also own Pret a Manger and Caribou Coffee and several other brands. And at the time, the CEO of Caribou Coffee, Mike Tattersfield, was like, hey, JAB, who was the PE firm, you really should buy Krispy Kreme. And they were like, okay. And so they did. And Mike started out on the board as an advisor, and then he actually joined Krispy Kreme as the CEO. And we turned over our entire C-suite. New CHRO, new CMO, new CIO, new CFO. Everybody was new. And they kind of burned the house down to the ground, went down to a bare bones staff, and then function by function, rebuilt it back up. Well, guess what was one of the last functions to get built back up? That was my team. Yeah, that was my team. So, we have a great leadership team who believes in all of this stuff, right? And we don't have any illusions that folks are going to memorize 12 mixed ingredients, because that's dumb. But what we do try and do is talk about them every day and make sure that they show up in everything that we do, right? So that's kind of how we bring this to life. And I specifically want to talk about 2 of the mixed ingredients that were really critical for all the work that myself and my team are doing. First is master your craft. And this is really all about the practice and dedication that is required to be great at doing your job, right? Nobody just wakes up one day and knows how to make 4,000 donuts. It just doesn't happen, right? Our equipment's pretty complicated. Our recipes are complicated. We bake everything in-house in our locations. So we don't freeze and ship and thaw. That's not our business model. So it requires a lot of skill. Decorating is hard. Replicating, especially the LTOs. I don't know if who's ever seen our Halloween LTO donuts. They are so cute and so hard to make. So it really requires a lot of practice for folks to master those skills, right? And to be able to deliver the quality that our customers expect from us. The second item is grow our peeps. And this is really all about establishing a culture of coaching and helping to grow other people, right? And these 2 mixed ingredients, we lean on these all the time on my team to help people understand the value of training, the value of practice, right? Because the formal learning, right, that's a teeny tiny little part of people developing new skills. The practice and the repetition and the coaching, that's 90% of what it takes to develop the skills. So we preach this all the time. So, culture, having a culture, I feel very fortunate, like I said, to have worked in a culture where this stuff is valued, and it's been super critical for the journey that we've been on. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where we started, the specific problems that we identified that we needed to solve, and then lastly, the solution that we landed on. Okay, so where were we when I joined Krispy Kreme? We were primarily analog. Little had been updated in our training materials for 20 years, and I'm not even kidding you. One of the first things I did was go out to a new shop opening when I joined, and I was, kind of just auditing, sitting in the back of the room, watching the training, and I was mortified by some of the videos that we showed, literally people in suits from the 1980s, and just slow, 40-minute videos, micro-learning. I don't even think was a concept back then, so we had a lot of work to do. But what was very apparent is that our training systems, specifically for onboarding new people, were very complicated and cumbersome. really complicated. I'm gonna walk you through a little bit of what that looks like, right? So we had hard copy workbooks, one for trainers, one for employees, which you had to order, right? So if you're not ordering them, you're just winging it. We also had, in a different manual, the training schedule, which was basically just like, day 1, do this, day 2, do that, with very little additional information about how you do it, how you teach it, none of that. It was just a roadmap. It wasn't specifics. And that was called the Hot Toolkit for Managers. We love a good pun at Krispy Kreme, right? So it's a little bit of a play on the hot now, the hot light. It stands for hiring, orientation, training. Very clever. I do say so myself. And lastly, we had some outdated Samsung tablets that literally nobody used. Like, you couldn't even find the charging cords for these things in the shops. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I'm not even showing here all the resource manuals and the brand standards that people had to go reference to figure out what people were actually supposed to be doing when you were training a new donut maker or donut decorator or cashier, right? So very, very complicated. So we set out on a mission to go out to the field, and myself, my team, our field training managers, we talked to a lot of people in the field. We audited a lot of training classes and asked a lot of questions about what was getting in the way of people really training folks effectively. And here are the top 4 problems that we identified. One, the hard copy training materials, they weren't available in most of our shops. Primarily, we found out that that was being driven by like budget constraints. Our GMs were like, it costs me money to order those. And I get bonused on my shop's profitability. So I'm just gonna opt out of those training materials. Also, they were not up to date, because who here has ever had to update hard copy manuals? Anybody? It sucks. It totally, totally sucks. I can remember back way in the early days at Starbucks, we had this giant binder, and whenever we would get an update, it was color-coded. So when my DM came in, he'd be like, you got the purple, you got the orange, you got the green, you got the yellow. Yeah, very complicated. We lacked visibility to what was actually going on. It was basically, the reporting was like a big old data dump, and if you did not have like a degree in Excel, you could not figure out what it was telling you. So not intuitive at all for our leaders. Our learning paths were not consistently being followed. What we learned is that what people were doing is, on the first day, they were sitting these poor new hires down and having them sit in front of the manager workstation and watch all of the videos back to back. Horrid, right? Horrible employee experience, and not a very effective way to teach people new skills, like information overload. And as a result, lots of people did not show up for day 2. They just were like, no, peace out. Thanks for trying, but not for me. And then lastly, we were heavily reliant on the expertise of the folks who were in our shops, right? Turnover, lack of knowledge about standards, people sharing tribal knowledge, perpetuating bad habits, like all of the things. It was kind of a mess. And these are the 4 things that we really got kind of laser focused on solving as we went to craft what the solution was going to be. All right, so the overarching solution was to upgrade our learning platform. And that included implementing a new learning management system and also upgraded iPads for every single shop location, which people love new stuff. So they were all, we knew they were going to get so excited about the iPads, but we were like, but we have to get them to use them. How do we do that? So we kind of came up with a strategy to address each one of those problems. And throughout the entire process, we kept checking in with our GMs, our field leaders, new hires, to make sure, like, directionally, okay, here's what we're thinking. Is this going to work for you? Here's what we're thinking. Is this going to work for you? To get validation that, like, yep, you're on the right track. So specifically, right, we digitized everything. And this solved two problems. It solved the budget issue because it doesn't cost the shops anything anymore. And we can update real time as standards change, right? So, and actually the cost, if we were ordering all the training materials, that actually paid for the LMS because we were starting to really drive training completion. And I was like, hold up, we also have a profitability initiative going on, and this is actually going to increase the store operating cost if people do what we're asking them to do. So is this really what we want people to do, right? So we digitized, which was awesome. To address the lack of management reporting, that was one of the critical features that we looked at in all of the learning management platforms that we evaluated. And we went with PlayerLink, so shout out to PlayerLink. They have been an awesome partner, very collaborative, and they are diligently ticking off all the things on my future wish list of like, I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do this. But they had super awesome out-of-the-box managerial reporting capabilities. And that has been key for us because you can't solve a problem if you can't see it. And we were like totally flying blind. Also, our trainers and our managers can get in there and see, like employee by employee or shop by shop or district by district, how are we trending, right? Super, super helpful. Also, we have like specific reporting for LTO training. So our marketing team, who cares a lot about that, can see in real time like, oh, 70% of people have taken the new training on the fall LTO, right? So super helpful for our cross-functional partners as well. To address the issue with the learning paths not being consistently followed, we implemented learning paths within the LMS, and this basically locks down the content, and as you complete a task, it unlocks the next thing. So if you want to go poke around out there, you can find it, but nobody wants to do that, right? And then we also have digital sign-offs and all kinds of great trainer resources in there to help support the hands-on training, which is so, so important. And then to help us correct for the expertise of incumbents, we standardize the training content based on the role. We have digital checklists that our trainers can follow. And we also embedded one-click access to resource manuals. So you don't have to go track down a resource manual right now, right? You want to double click on a standard, boop, it brings you to the exact page in the resource manual that you need to see. So it's received really great, we've received super great feedback from the field on all of this stuff. All right, so we went from this, which was a mess, to this, right? Which is really a one-stop shop. It's awesome. We've got standard learning paths. We've got, we kind of control the flow of information that people see. And we've got trackable hands-on practice, which we never had before. So we decided to pilot this before we went big. And this is Rob. He was one of our GMs who is in our pilot. And that's what Rob had to say. Let's make the lives of our GMs and our trainers easier, right? So they can focus on doing their job. And so after the pilot, we got the green light to implement across the US, plus we got funding to completely overhaul all of our outdated training. And I see one of my friends from Modern Training out there. Big shout out to Modern Training, who's actually kind of working as an extension of my learning design team to help us create all of this new training. And it's blended learning, and it's got certified trainer content, and it's micro-learning based, and it's modular. So as jobs shift, we can take this piece over here and plug it in over there. So it's super, super flexible. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's coming next. Because I am a strategist and I'm a future thinker. And so this is what really excites me the most, is what this foundation is enabling us to be able to do moving forward. All right. So number one, like I mentioned, we've got a full curriculum rebuild underway right now. And that is a beast, let me tell you. Because not only did we need new training, but we did not have our SOPs documented. So we've had a team of partners in our store op services group documenting, like, I'm not even joking, like 1,600 pages of SOPs, which still, I mean, we got to do another pass at that, but progress, right? Progress, not perfection. That's kind of been our mantra. We will be implementing QR codes for just-in-time training, stuff like troubleshooting or things that people don't do very frequently, so they can pull up that information and get a refresher right there on the spot. We've got, in the future, learning customizations for each employee based on the shop type that they work in, the kinds of coffee maker that they have, the size of their donut making line, whether they have a drive-through or not, so they don't have to sift through stuff that's not relevant to them. And that is super exciting. And then lastly, world domination. That's on the agenda. But seriously, we've got a bunch of international markets, company-owned and operated markets, and we've all been operating very independently, which is super inefficient. So over probably the next 4 or 5 years, the plan is to get everybody onto the same platform, onto the same standardized training, and to have truly like global operating standards, which is pretty cool. So a couple thoughts I want to leave you with in terms of tips. One is invest the time, do the work to figure out what the root causes of the problems are that you need to solve. Like, don't guess, go out, talk to people, look at the data, figure it out. Have a super tight problems statement and like manage that ruthlessly. Once we started to see some success, I cannot tell you how many teams wanted to like hitch their project to our wagon, like, oh, can we use the iPads for this? And can we do that? And I was like, no. No, you may not, which didn't necessarily win me a lot of friends, but it was what the field needed, right, to get their work done. Think about change management from the very beginning, right? And not just the tactical stuff that's going to change, like how do you access the new system and where do you click to get the training, but think about what are the behaviors that you need to shift and what are the mindsets that need to change, and come up with a strategy for how you're going to address those. Because if you don't shift the behaviors and the mindsets, it's probably not going to stick. And that, honestly, was the biggest lift for the whole project. And then lastly, identify your change agents, right? We had our pilot people, we have a GM council, we had, advocates and store op services, and those people helped us get everybody hyped up and help us sustain the change. And don't let up until the change has stuck. Because I know a lot of organizations have a tendency to like implement, move on, implement, move on. You got to sustain the change. Otherwise, it's not going to stick. So that is it. That's my story.